This program called Be Conversations is a public space to have discussions on social and relational practices and how these practices offer us appreciative, collaborative, improvisational ways to create processes across families, um, organizations, and communities. So we come from different disciplines in conversation here. And in today's conversation, we're going to be focusing on leading as collaborative practice. And this program is sponsored by the master's program in relational leading that Sheila was referring to a few minutes back. And I'll talk a little bit more about the program later. I want to introduce myself. I'm Saliha Bava, and I am one of the Taos Associates. And in conversation today with me are Kristin and Sheila, and I'm going to invite them to introduce themselves as you see yourself in relationship to this topic and to Taos Institute. Kristin, do you want to go first?
Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us, and thanks for posting onto the discussion area. And so as we get more practice with this, we'll definitely be smoother. So I appreciate you beta testing with us. So I'm Kristin Bodiford, received my doctorate through the Taos Tilburg program, and Sheila was my advisor. And so I'm just delighted to be here with Sheila today in conversation, because I miss our conversations about collaborative practice. So it's just a joy to be here to talk about this today. I'm also a visiting assistant professor at Dominican University Graduate School of Social Work, where I do quite a bit of work around trauma, healing, restorative practices, and community practice. So thank you for having me here today, and I'm really delighted to be part of the core faculty for the Masters in Relational Leading with Taos.
And thank you. Sheila, please introduce yourself, and then can you lead us into this conversation on relational leading and collaborative practices?
Sure. Thanks, Saliha, and thanks to all of you who have been waiting patiently. I appreciate you all hanging out on the Google Hangout for us. I'm Sheila McNamee. I'm a founder of the Taos Institute. I'm the vice president of the Taos Institute, and sort of have all my fingers in all the different activities of the Taos Institute, and we are really excited to have the launch of this new master's program in relational leading. It's a really exciting opportunity for us, and at the same time, it seems to be, at least our hope is, and our inspiration is, that it's filling a much needed gap for many practitioners who are interested in relational leading. So with that said, and with thanks for all your patience again, let me kick it off by answering a question that many people have asked already, and that we, in fact, kind of tossed around as we developed this program, and that is, why leading and not leadership? And we're really, by using the term relational leading, we're really putting the emphasis on the process that people participate in as they engage in the workplace or in communities or in educational settings. When we talk about leadership, we tend to fall into a literature and a way of talking that emphasizes qualities of an individual, that, you know, either someone is born a leader or they've developed leadership qualities. And we really want to turn that around and talk about leading as a collaborative form of practice, that it is not a quality of any one individual, but instead it is something that emerges in the to and fro of everyday interaction in a variety of contexts, in any context. So it may sound a little bit odd to some people to have a master's in relational leading, but we hope that that term becomes a popular term and really begins to emphasize the relational aspect of creating our worlds. Kristin, do you want to add something to that notion about leading versus leadership?
Sure. Thanks, Thanks, Sheila, for that. And I really appreciate you setting the context of this as a process. And the word comes up for me, too, of a responsibility. Power is often very infused in this concept of leadership. And with leading, there's more of a sense of being responsive and responsible in that position of leading. I'm also thinking of the construction in every moment, that it opens up new possibilities, new ways of being, that this concept of leadership provides certain ways of being that seem more fixed. So if we're constructing every moment, that leading looks very different in every moment. So we're flexible, we're fluid, responsive to what's needed in the moment. To me, it's what are we constructing through leadership? What are we creating or leading? What are we creating together? And so it's, again, it just has a sense of fluidity, a dynamic movement.
Yeah, I just want to add something to what you're saying, Kristin. I really like the way you put that, and the issue of power always is an issue that comes up. And, you know, of course, when we're talking about leadership, that's a huge topic. And so this notion of the processual, interactive, relational nature of leading really allows us to look at power as, you know, power with those with whom we are working to create something. I like that notion of the directional, not a unilateral directionality, but, you know, the multiplicity of possibilities of what we can create together as we are attentive to what's happening, what's unfolding. And so another thought that came to me was the notion of this reflexive stance, that we are constantly engaging in self-reflexive and relational reflexive inquiry about what we're doing. You know, what am I doing here? How's that influencing what we're doing together? What are we doing together? That very much puts the emphasis on the process of creating something together in a variety of contexts. So let me just speak a little bit about context, because we don't envision restricting this particular master's program to a, you know, strict organizational development, organizational change, organizational behavior set of interests, but rather, you know, we're looking at collaborative relational practices in communities, in education, in healthcare, in politics. I mean, there's the range is infinite almost, and those variety of contexts have great relevance for leading and what we construct together.
I love that, Sheila. When you talked about the reflexive practice, that was very meaningful to me, and just a recent example of leading that I was experiencing. And I had this image of leadership as someone maybe thinking, I have this plan and we need to get, like, for example, my work with communities, we have this goal of where we're trying to get, and my leading or my leadership will take us there, which is when you shift to think of this reflexivity in every moment, it shifts that stance. Like, I physically felt a shift in what stance someone might bring to leading from that perspective of reflexivity. And so being responsive in every moment of what's occurring within the community. And so I had an experience where we had a community plan, and with this comes all of the resources that go along with that, and the commitments and organizing that goes along with that. And at a meeting, it shifted. And I found myself having to really let go of trying to reach that goal that we had already established and committed to, and really shifting to being responsive and reflexive of what was emerging in that space. And so I think what you just mentioned there was a really wonderful example of what I experienced. It's not an easy thing to do. Mm-hmm. And if we follow a lot of the traditional paradigms of leadership, it would be, how do we convince or work to get people back on track, or it's more of a control model. And so again, that concept of power and collaboration, that was really beautiful. So thank you for that. And you spoke to my passion around communities and political systems, and I know with Saliha and therapeutic contexts, and so many different ways that people are going to be able to bring in different contexts of thinking about leading. So I appreciate you speaking about that.
Right. Yeah, thank you. I also, what you raised, this idea of having a plan, and that is such an endemic notion to being a good leader. I really like, as we enter into a constructionist or relational way of talking about leading as a process, this distinction between preparing and planning. So, of course, you know, the relational leader prepares, but prepares to change. You know, where a plan, we think, you know, we have our marching orders and now we just have to get everybody to line up. As we've already identified they should line up. And so that distinction, you know, that how do we prepare ourselves to engage the multiple voices that could help bring to fruition whatever we're trying to create in whatever the context we're operating in. So I think that that's really a good way to think about it. Which sort of then brings me to the notion of collaborative practice, and what do we mean by that, and what's this connection between relational leading and collaborative practice. And of course, I think we probably are all aware of this shift to exactly what you were speaking to, Kristin. You know, you prepared, you had some ideas, but then in a meeting, what emerged and what you did was really the byproduct of the multiple voices of everyone there, and that's the sort of collaborative work that we're talking about, and will be a real emphasis in this program. How do you create contexts that invite people to collaborate, that invite people to really, you know, be a full participant in creating what could be their own future together? So that calls into question, we've already called into question a lot of things like power and so forth, but that calls into question this notion of what it means to be an expert or to be a professional. And of course, from a collaborative stance, what we'd like to be talking about in this master's program is everybody's an expert in something, everybody's a professional at something. The question is, how do we become curious and engage in some kind of dialogue with others about their expertise, their professionalism, so that we can bring the best of all the resources for action that are in the room, and maybe even outside of the room, together to craft the next phase of whatever it is we're doing, whether we're doing community building or a new organizational restructuring or what have you.
Well, while we are talking about muting, Kristin, can you hear me?
Yes, yeah.
I would say you're going to have the last word on this round because we're right there where we need to pause. So can you close off with a closing thought with your comments on Sheila's?
A closing thought.
Or a pausing thought.
Yes. So this concept of curiosity, I think, is so important, and it speaks to. I was thinking about an article that I read that Harlene Anderson wrote. One thing that I love about this master's program is that we just have this wealth of other faculty as well that we can bring into the coursework that can speak to the different contexts. I think, Sheila, that you were speaking about, but she talks about this collaborative practice as performing spontaneously, and has different kind of tools that we can bring in collaborative practices and leading, and the maintaining our skepticism, our skepticism and avoiding generalization, I think, really are some of the principles of this maintaining curiosity piece, that so many times we can come in thinking we have the answer, or I remember, Sally Hahn, a course that you were teaching as well, this concept of that we bring in this idea of like, well, this is what collaborative practice is. And I've fallen into this having this notion of what collaborative practice is too, and I think, oh, but they're not collaborating. And so I've fallen into this, having this answer what collaborative practices look like, and so bringing myself back to that in every moment we're collaborating. And so how am I responsive in this leading position to being in this place of collaboration and not having a fixed standpoint or a fixed notion of what collaborative practice looks like. So I just wanted to bring in also Harlene's ideas with that. And so thank you for the opportunity to just start some of this dialogue. I'm very excited about continuing the conversations.
So thank you, Kristin. Thank you, Sheila. This is exciting, and yes, it's just like it feels like a tease. Just as we were warming up, we have to call it to a close. There have been some interesting comments on the site. I don't know if you can see the Q&A. If Sue has mentioned that this is very exciting. I echo Samuel's comment on leadership, and the program sounds exciting. Jeannie is talking about technology, and I'll come back to that, Jeannie. I think Papusa mentioned that connection that, Sheila, when you talk about expertise, what comes to mind is Harleen Anderson's notion of not knowing. So I think this is a great kickoff for leading as collaborative practice, because I think it took all of us doing what we did today to have this conversation. All of us were in some ways leaders and leading, as there was a comment made by Sue Mitten where she said, no, don't give up, keep going. And I think that voice was an example of how she was collaborating as a participant to say, get Sheila on the phone, get Kristin on there, let's do it. So I think it's a fabulous example. And I thank you both again for this rich conversation and for being willing participants to do this beta testing, and all the participants who joined us. If you're interested in learning more about the Relational Leading program, the Masters in Relational Leading, you can go visit the website www.relational-leading.net. And it's a global program, and we're designing it to offer a very supportive learning community that reflects on the complexity of the issues we are speaking in a very fast-changing world, while inviting you to bring your work experience and your creative imagination to grow these practices in the work spaces that you occupy and in the learning spaces that we're all part of. So thank you again, Sheila. Thank you again, Kristin. It's been great, and I hope you'll all join me again in next month in March. Towards the end of March, we'll be having another conversation, and the information will go out. Thank you again for joining us. Have a good day, and continue to reflect on relational practices and relational leading on Twitter and Facebook, and on the comments on YouTube where this video will be alive.